The thing about space is that it's mostly empty, which is a relief if you've got social anxiety, but a real bummer if you're trying to hide something. Unless, of course, you've got a planet-sized camouflage net. Or, Saturn's rings. That's where we come in. Captain Leora Tark at your service or disservice, depending on how you've pissed me off today. We were on a routine patrol, and by routine, I mean mind-numbingly boring when the sensors pinged. A whole lot of nothing suddenly became a whole lot of something. Something ancient. Something alien. Something that reeked of problems. "Captain, you might want to see this," muttered Solomon, my second-in-command, with the enthusiasm of a slug on a salt flat. His face was a study in controlled apathy, eyebrows barely twitching as he pointed at the screen. "If it's another bloody comet, I'm going to throw myself into the nearest black hole," I muttered back, striding over. And there it was. Nestled among the icy chunks of Saturn's rings like a forgotten toy in a sandbox was a structure, definitely not a comet. "Well, that's peculiar," I said, trying to sound more interested than I felt. "Peculiar," Solomon echoed, nodding sagely. "That's one way to describe an alien temple." I squinted at the screen. "It might not be a temple, could be a space brothel." "If that's the case, I'm quitting," Solomon replied dryly. "I have standards." "You, standards?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Let's get closer, but cautiously. Like a first date, but with less wine and more imminent danger." Our ship, the Rust Bucket affectionately named because Crap Heap was taken slid through space with the grace of a drunken walrus. The closer we got, the more the temple came into view. Jagged spires jutted out, casting ominous shadows against the ice. If it was a brothel, it catered to a very niche clientele. "Looks like whatever it is, it's been here a while," Solomon said, scanning the readings. "Longer than your last relationship anyway." "Ha ha. Just because my longest commitment is to this ship doesn't mean you get to judge," I retorted. "Judging is my second job," he smirked. The rest of the crew were gathered around, throwing in their 2 cents worth like a bunch of old ladies at a bake sale. "Maybe it's a museum," said Gino, the engineer, who was more grease than man. "If it is, let's hope it doesn't come with any obnoxious tour guides," added Maria, our medic, who had the bedside manner of a cactus. As captain, it was my job to go first, which is another way of saying I was the unlucky bastard responsible for poking ancient alien things with a stick. I suited up, feeling the familiar twinge of nerves. Nothing like the possibility of a glorious, fiery death to get the blood pumping. "Remember," Solomon intoned as I headed to the airlock, "if you die, I get your coffee rations." "I'm touched by your concern," I shot back. The airlock shuddered open and I stepped into the void. Floating through space, I couldn't help but feel like an ant way out of its depth. The temple loomed, a monolithic reminder that humans weren't the only species to think they could play God. I landed with all the finesse of a three-legged cat, cursing as I nearly bounced off into oblivion. "Smooth," Solomon's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Bite me," I muttered, getting my bearings. The surface was smooth, yet pockmarked with the scars of time and space. Alien glyphs carved into the stone glowed faintly, like the remnants of a dying star. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Solomon asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his usual monotony. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm seeing it." Touching the glyphs was a stupid idea, so of course I did it. Because who doesn't love a bit of reckless endangerment? My fingers brushed over the carved symbols and for a moment nothing happened. Then the whole structure vibrated. Captain, might want to rethink the whole touching thing," Solomon suggested, his voice climbing an octave. "Noted," I replied, backing away as the temple seemed to awaken. Lights flared, circuits hummed, and I could almost hear an ancient voice whispering in the cosmic void. "So definitely not a brothel," I murmured. The ground beneath me shifted and a panel slid open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. Because of course the universe loves its cliches. "Guess I'm going down," I sighed. "You sure about that?" Solomon asked. "You could always just, not. And miss out on the likely adrenaline rush and potential death." "Never," I grinned, though my heart was pounding. Descending the steps felt like walking into the open maw of some great beast. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the temple itself was watching, waiting. "Captain, what do you see?" Maria's voice crackled through the comms, tinged with concern. "Nothing yet," I replied, trying not to sound like I was about to shit myself. "Just darkness." The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling down into the bowels of the temple. As I reached the bottom, a vast chamber opened up before me, illuminated by a sickly green light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it a device that looked far too familiar, the kind of familiarity that makes your skin crawl. "Solomon, you seeing this?" I whispered. "Yeah," he replied, voice low. "Looks like human tech." "That's what I was afraid of," I said, unable to tear my eyes from the device. "What the hell's it doing here?" "Maybe it's not," Solomon offered, trying to sound hopeful and failing miserably. "Maybe it just looks like it. And maybe pigs have started flying," I muttered. "This changes things." "You think?" Solomon snarked. I approached the pedestal cautiously, the device humming with a life of its own. It was unmistakably of Earth origin, yet here it was, sitting in an alien ruin light years from home. "Captain, I've got a bad feeling about this place," Maria said, her voice a lifeline in the static. "You're not the only one," I admitted. "But we've opened this can of worms, we need to see it through." "And if those worms start biting?" Gino asked. "Then we squash him," I said, trying to sound a lot braver than I felt. I reached for the device, half expecting it to vaporize me on the spot. Instead, it pulsed with a rhythmic beat, like the heart of some ancient creature. "Okay, that's weird," I said, stating the obvious. "Weird's our specialty," Solomon replied. "Bring it back and let's get the hell out of here." "On it," I said, carefully removing the device. It was heavier than it looked, and as soon as it left the pedestal, the chamber shuddered. "Captain, I think you broke it," Solomon quipped. "Just what I needed," I groaned, making my way back to the stairs. The temple seemed to protest my departure, walls vibrating with a low, angry hum. "Move your ass, Captain," Solomon urged, as if I needed encouragement. "Working on it," I panted, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. Back outside, the ship was a welcome sight, its battered hull promising a dubious kind of safety. "Got the goods," I announced, breathless but exhilarated. "Let's hope they're worth it," Solomon replied. I sealed the airlock behind me, the weight of what I'd found pressing down like a lead blanket. "So, what now?" Maria asked, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "Now," I said, holding up the device, "we figure out what the hell this is and why it was in that temple." The crew gathered around, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. "And if we can't figure it out?" Gino asked. "Then we're screwed," Solomon said cheerfully. "But hey," I added with a grin, "at least we'll go down in history as the idiots who unleashed God knows what on the universe." Everyone laughed, a tense, nervous sound that echoed in the silence of space. We had no idea what we were dealing with, but one thing was certain. Our little corner of the universe just got a whole lot more dangerous. And somehow I had a feeling this was just the beginning. "Buckle up," I said, staring out at the endless void. "It's going to be a bumpy ride." So, we've just gone from routine patrol to starring roles in the interstellar version of Oops, we did it again, I muttered as I slouched into the captain's chair. The rest of the crew were back at their stations, trying to make sense of the alien tech I'd stumbled across. Or rather, that hadn't disintegrated me upon touch, because life loves a gamble, and apparently I'm its favorite pawn. Solomon gave me a sideways glance. "Feeling lucky?" "If by lucky you mean still alive despite a severe lack of good choices, then yes," I replied, spinning the device like a top. It was mesmerizing and headache-inducing all at once. Gino, our engineer, who looked like he could use a bath in industrial solvent, leaned over his console. "Captain, I think this thing's got a heartbeat." I raised an eyebrow. "That's disconcerting." "Yeah, but it's got rhythm," he shot back, tapping his foot to an imaginary beat. "Great. Our potentially universe-destroying alien artifact is musical," I said, rolling my eyes. "What's next?" "Does it do requests?" Maria, ever the ray of sunshine, piped up from her corner. Maybe it's the alien equivalent of a mixtape. To human race, thanks for all the fish. Let's hope it's not a diss track, Solomon added dryly. The ship's sensors beeped ominously as if to underline the fact that we were in deep, uncharted shit. A new blip appeared on the screen, slowly resolving into something big, ominous, and definitely not friendly. Captain," Maria said, her voice suddenly serious. "We've got company." The image on the screen was unmistakable, a massive ship, bristling with alien tech, advancing on our position. It looked like someone took a cathedral, added tentacles, and then decided it needed more tentacles. Because why not? "That's no moon," Solomon quipped, and I resisted the urge to laugh. Barely. As the alien ship approached, our sensors picked up a transmission. The voice was guttural, like sandpaper being dragged over a chalkboard. Whatever they were selling, I wasn't buying. "You have trespassed in the sacred domain of the TZ-Kren," it announced with all the warmth of a tax collector. "Prepare for judgment." "Judgment?" I muttered, glancing at Solomon, who merely shrugged. "Well, that's a first for me." Solomon tapped a few buttons, opening a channel. "This is Captain Solomon of the Rust Bucket. We're just here on a field trip, no sacrilege intended." The voice, who I imagined belonging to something with too many teeth, sneered back. "You have disturbed what was meant to be left undisturbed." "The penalty is servitude." "Servitude?" I repeated, incredulous. "To what? Your cleaning crew, or their organ donation program," Solomon added. "I'm sure they'd love human livers, though they'd be disappointed with mine." "It's seen better days," I quipped. The TZ-Kren were not amused. Alien humor is apparently a tough crowd. "You will comply or face destruction," the voice declared, with the kind of finality usually reserved for gravity and taxes. "Not a fan of options, are they?" Maria remarked, dry as a desert. "Let's see what we're dealing with first," I said, my mind racing through possible outcomes, most ending with us as space debris. "Gino, what can you tell me about their ship?" Gino scratched his head, leaving a smear of grease. "Well, on the plus side, it's a marvel of engineering. On the downside, it's pointing enough weapons at us to turn the rust bucket into a fine cloud of particles." "We're outgunned," Maria concluded, and I could almost see her mentally penning her resignation letter to fate. I drummed my fingers on the console, thinking hard. "They want servitude, huh? Let's give them something to chew on." Solomon frowned. "You're not planning to surrender, are you?" "Of course not," I replied, feigning innocence. "Just need to buy some time to figure out how to not die today." The alien voice returned, impatient now. "Have you decided?" "Yeah," I said, leaning towards the mic. "We'd like to negotiate. Can we speak to your manager?" Silence. Then, surprisingly, laughter, a sound that resonated like a rock slide. "Humans. Always so amusing before they are crushed." "Well, we aim to please," I replied sweetly. "Look, your holiness or whatever, we really don't want to fight. We just stumbled upon your temple and got curious." "Curious," the voice echoed, now tinged with something that might have been interest. "It is a dangerous trait." "Only if you lack a sense of humor," Solomon chimed in. A moment of silence or perhaps contemplation passed. Then, "Very well, you shall have your audience, but know this. The TZ-Kren do not negotiate with those who do not respect their power." "Respect, you say?" I grinned. "We respect the hell out of power. We just don't want to be on the receiving end of it." The alien ship drew closer, its shadow swallowing us like a cosmic whale about to snack on a krill-sized morsel. Our odds weren't looking good, but then again, they never really did. Gino shot me a look that screamed skepticism. "You really think they're going to let us walk away?" "They're going to do whatever they want," I shrugged. "But maybe we can convince them that playing nice is better than turning us into space confetti." Maria tapped her console, pulling up data on the alien vessel. "Their shields are strong, but I've noticed a pattern. It fluctuates every 63 seconds. "That's not a lot of time," I said, mentally filing the info away for later. "It's better than nothing," Solomon countered. The alien ship's hangar bay opened, a gaping maw inviting us in. It was the sort of invitation that came with an RSVP of exit strategy optional. "Think of it as a diplomatic mission," I told my crew, trying to sound optimistic. with a side of don't get vaporized. Hope they've got decent snacks, Gino muttered. I'm starving. As we docked, the alien bay enveloped us in an eerie, greenish glow. The TZ-Kren hadn't skimped on the intimidation budget. We've got this, I said, less to reassure them and more to assure myself. Remember, we're the Rust Bucket crew. Insanity is essentially our job description. The airlock opened with a hiss, and we stepped out into a place that looked like H.R. Giger had gone on a bender. The architecture was alien in every sense, organic curves meeting sharp metallic angles, all bathed in sickly hues that made everything feel alive. Lovely place, Solomon deadpanned. Very, homey. A contingent of TZ-Kren awaited us, their forms obscured by shadow and menace. They were taller than us, lanky and covered in a leathery hide that shimmered under the lights. You will follow, the lead TZ-Kren commanded, gesturing with something that might have been an arm, or a tentacle. Hard to tell. No pressure, I whispered to my crew as we followed, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. They led us to a chamber that could have been a throne room if the throne was designed for a creature with an apparent fetish for spikes. At its center sat the TZ-Kren leader, a being whose mere presence screamed authority and probably a healthy dose of bloodlust. So, I began, clearing my throat, thanks for the warm welcome. The leader fixed us with a stare that had the warmth of a glacier. You stand before the great overseer of the TZ-Kren. Speak your piece, humans. Nice title, I said, forcing a smile. Look, we just stumbled upon your temple by accident. We're not looking for trouble, we're just explorers. Explorers, the overseer echoed like it was a dirty word. You seek to understand what you cannot. Well, Solomon interjected, we're humans. Poking our noses where it doesn't belong is kind of our thing. The overseer tilted its head, perhaps considering this. Your actions have awakened the old defenses of the temple. Now you must prove your worth. Prove our worth, I repeated, feigning surprise. You mean you don't just take cash? What passed for humor among the TZ-Kren was beyond me, but their leader seemed to consider the notion before dismissing it. The temple has chosen its challenge. You must navigate the maze and deactivate the core before it consumes the intruders. Great, Solomon muttered under his breath. A maze. I hate mazes, Maria whispered, eyes narrowing. Better than being turned inside out, Gino offered, trying to sound optimistic and failing spectacularly. Challenge accepted, I declared, because what else could I do? But if we succeed, we go free. No servitude, no judgment. The overseer seemed to ponder this, or maybe it was just sizing us up for future snacks. Agreed. But know this, failure will not be tolerated. Story of my life, I muttered as we were led away, the promise of looming death hanging overhead like a particularly persistent storm cloud. The TZ-Kren escorted us to the entrance of the maze, which looked less like a maze and more like the inside of a giant blender, complete with spinning blades and all. Remember, I said to my crew, we've faced worse odds. When? Solomon asked, skepticism lacing his words. Well, never, I admitted. But there's a first time for everything. With that, we stepped into the labyrinth, the air humming with the promise of both danger and discovery. We were on the clock, and time was a luxury we couldn't afford. The stakes were high, but so was the adrenaline, and if we were going to make it out alive, we'd need every ounce of luck we could muster. Let's make history, I said, leading the charge into the unknown. Or at least a good story for the afterlife. The maze loomed ahead, its walls shifting like a living organism, as if daring us to find our way through. Whatever awaited us, we'd face it the only way we knew how, with humor, determination, and a healthy disregard for self-preservation. Forward into the heart of chaos, I declared, and we plunged deeper into the maze, ready to face whatever twisted trials lay ahead. Because in the end, that's what humans do best. We survive, we adapt, and we laugh in the face of the impossible. The maze was a sick joke. Walls shifted and groaned like they had a hangover, while the floor pulsed beneath our feet like it was nursing an impending existential crisis. It was exactly the kind of place that made you wish for the simplicity of being shot at. Maria tapped her wrist computer, trying to get a read on the maze layout. This place makes a Rubik's Cube look like a children's puzzle, Gino snorted. I'd rather wrestle a malfunctioning toaster than deal with this. Just don't toast your sanity in the process, Solomon added, letting out a low whistle as the walls shifted again. I think the TZ-Kren spent too much on the intimidation and not enough on the user experience. This place isn't so bad, I said, stepping over what looked like a pile of alien droppings. It's like a haunted house without the fun. Maria stopped, holding up a hand. Wait, do you feel that? The floor vibrated like the heartbeat of a very angry beast. Feels like home, I muttered. A home that's ready to evict us with extreme prejudice. Lovely, Solomon said, peering down a corridor that had just opened up like a mouth ready to snack on us. How much you want to bet this is the path to certain death? Low odds, high payout, I said. Let's roll. As we trudged deeper into the maze, the air grew thicker, oppressive, like the TZ-Kren had installed some sort of intergalactic sauna. My shirt stuck to my skin, and I found myself envying Gino's ability to look perpetually greasy without effort. The corridor widened into a chamber, filled with glowing orbs floating like wayward stars. This looks promising, I said, trying to sound confident. Or, deadly. How about both? Maria suggested. The orbs are giving off some serious energy readings. Probable cause for detonation or disintegration. Or maybe they're just mood lighting, Solomon quipped. Nice to see the aliens care about ambience, I said, reaching out to touch one. It pulsed under my fingers, sending a ripple through my arm and causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up. Captain, I think the orbs are part of the maze defense system, Gino warned, his eyes wide with something that might have been terror or indigestion. Well, in that case, I said, drawing my hand back, let's not play with the glowing death baubles. A sudden shudder rippled through the room, and the orbs began to pulse in unison, creating a sound that thrummed in my bones. It was like standing too close to a subwoofer at a concert, except the band was out for blood. Time to move, I said, ushering the crew back toward one of the corridors. The floor beneath us tilted, sliding us like ants on a greased pan toward an opening that yawned like the jaws of oblivion. Not exactly the express route I had in mind, Solomon grumbled as we struggled to keep our footing. Think of it as an interplanetary treadmill, I replied, barely managing to sidestep a particularly hungry-looking crevice. On the bright side, Maria said, breathless, at least we know the maze has a sense of humor, or a sadistic streak. We stumbled into another chamber, this one filled with an eerie blue light that washed over everything like an ocean's glow. In the center stood a structure, an altar of sorts, throbbing with energy that made the hairs on my arm stand up. What the hell? Solomon said, eyeing the altar with a mixture of curiosity and dread. Is that thing alive? Not sure, I replied, but it's definitely not a fan of us being here. Gino, any thoughts? Gino glanced at his scanner. It's connected to the maze power core. Deactivating it might shut down the defenses. Or blow us to bits, Maria added helpfully. Well, let's aim for shut down and hope for the best, I said, moving closer to the altar. My fingers itched with the urge to dismantle, to poke and prod until it spilled its secrets. The altar hummed softly, as if mocking our attempts. It was like trying to reason with a particularly uncooperative vending machine, one that might zap you for fun. Okay, I said, bracing myself. Let's see what makes this thing tick. As I began to work, the air around us grew colder, charged with an electric tension. It was like standing in the eye of a storm, one that promised a reckoning with every breath. Solomon kept watch, his gaze darting back and forth. Any chance this thing is going to summon something worse than the TZ-Kren? I'd say the odds are excellent, Maria replied, keeping one eye on the shifting walls. But hey, at least we're consistent with our bad luck. Just keep your fingers crossed, I muttered, focusing on the task at hand. The altar's surface was smooth, almost liquid, and yielded to my touch with a reluctant shiver. Gino hovered nearby, offering advice that was equal parts useful and exasperating. Try rotating that panel. No, the other one. Yes, that might do it. Or kill us. Appreciate the optimism, I grunted, managing to pry open a section of the altar. Inside, circuits pulsed like veins in an alien body, thrumming with an energy that promised equal parts salvation and destruction. All right, I said, taking a deep breath. Here goes nothing. I reached in, fingers dancing among the circuits as if playing an intricate tune. The altar's hum grew louder, a crescendo that built to a fever pitch, vibrating through my bones. Then, with a final twist, the hum ceased, replaced by a deep, resonant silence that was almost worse. As if the altar was holding its breath, waiting for the next act in this cosmic drama. The room shuddered once, then fell still. The lights dimmed and the temperature dropped, leaving us shivering in the sudden cold. "Did it work?" Solomon asked, his voice piercing the silence like a beacon. "Only one way to find out," I replied, stepping back from the altar. It loomed ominously, an alien monolith that promised more questions than answers. The walls shifted again, but this time it felt different, as if the maze was reconsidering its options. The oppressive energy dissipated, replaced by a sense of tentative calm. "Looks like we might have bought ourselves some time," I said, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Let's move before it changes its mind." We retraced our steps through the maze, guided by the dim glow of emergency lights that flickered like dying stars. The walls seemed less malevolent, the corridors less threatening. Still, the sense of impending doom lingered, like a shadow that clung to our every step. It was the kind of feeling that made you question every choice, every decision, every misstep. We reached the entrance of the maze, where the TZ-Kren awaited, their forms silhouetted against the harsh light of the hangar bay. The overseer stood at the forefront, its gaze inscrutable as ever. "You have succeeded," the overseer said, its voice a low rumble that echoed through the chamber. "The temple's defenses have been disarmed." "Yeah, well, we're full of surprises," I replied, trying not to sound too relieved. "Now about that whole letting us go thing." The overseer considered us, its expression unreadable. "The temple has judged you worthy. You are free to leave." "That's it?" Solomon asked, incredulous. "No fanfare, no parade. You're welcome to stay for the after-party," I said. "But I hear the entertainment's pretty deadly." "Your humor is noted," the overseer said, a hint of something that might have been amusement in its voice. "Go, humans, your path is clear." We didn't need to be told twice. As we made our way back to the rust bucket, the tension began to bleed away, replaced by a weary sort of triumph. "Another day, another close call," Maria said, her tone wry. "Just another Tuesday." "We did good," I said, allowing myself a moment of pride. "And we're alive." "That's more than we could have hoped for." "Agreed," Gino said, his eyes gleaming with relief. "But next time, let's avoid waking up ancient alien defenses, yeah." "Where's the fun in that?" Solomon replied, a grin splitting his face. We boarded the rust bucket, the familiar hum of the ship's engines a welcome relief. As we settled into our chairs, I couldn't help but feel a pang of gratitude for the hunk of metal that had carried us through so much. "Set a course for anywhere but here," I said, sinking into my seat. "And let's see if we can avoid any more homicidal alien tech for the rest of our lives." "Here's hoping," Maria said, punching in the coordinates. "Ready to fly, Captain." As we launched into the void, Saturn's rings dwindling behind us, I took a deep breath and allowed myself a rare moment of contentment. We'd survived another brush with the impossible and lived to tell the tale. And in the end, that's what it was all about, defying the odds, facing the unknown, and laughing in the face of cosmic absurdity. Because if we couldn't laugh at the insanity of it all, then what was the point? Space was vast, unpredictable, and filled with dangers we couldn't begin to comprehend. But as long as we had each other, and a ship that held together just one more time, we'd face whatever came next with grit, determination, and most importantly, humor. The rust bucket rattled through the void, like a space jalopy held together by hope, duct tape, and the sheer bloody-mindedness of its crew. I slouched in the captain's chair, the weight of what we'd just been through pressing down like one of those Tzykran orbs had decided to take up residence in my chest. The crew was quiet for a moment, still shaking off the tension of our escape. Maria fiddled with her wrist computer, probably playing solitaire or looking up the interstellar equivalent of cat videos. Gino was busy trying to coax some music out of the ship's ancient speaker system, something with less static and more guitar. Solomon leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at his lips like he'd bet on the long odds and somehow came up ahead. "So, Captain, what's next on the hit parade? Another suicide mission or maybe just a nice leisurely trip to the edge of sanity?" "Aim for the latter," I said, lacing my fingers behind my head. "But knowing our luck, we'll end up with both." "Speaking of luck," Maria chimed in, not looking up from her device, "did you know the Tzykran have a plan to use that temple to enslave humanity?" Fun fact I stumbled upon while we were dodging death. The room fell silent, the air turning thick with unspoken dread. Well, thicker. The rust bucket's filtration system hadn't been up to par since. Ever really. I sat up, feeling the familiar prickle of rage licking at my nerves. "Care to elaborate on that, Maria?" She tapped a few buttons, projecting a holographic display midair. "Intercepted some encrypted transmissions while we were playing hide and seek with alien architecture. The Tzykran believe they can co-opt the temple's tech to brainwash humanity, turn us into compliant little worker bees. Worker drones, more like," Solomon muttered, his smirk fading into a grimace. Gino's fingers stilled on the console, his eyes wide. "So what, they just flip a switch and we all become mindless drones? That's messed up." "Understatement of the century," I muttered, staring at the hologram like it might spontaneously combust from sheer anger. "All right, crew, we've got a mission. Sabotage the core, stop the Tzykran, save humanity. Just another Tuesday, right?" Maria sighed, finally putting down her wrist computer. "You do know that sabotage means we're going back there, right? To the place filled with death traps and zero ambience." "Yeah, but think of the upside," Solomon said, eyes gleaming with mischief. "If we pull this off, we won't have to listen to Leora's snoring anymore." "Ha ha," I deadpanned, rolling my eyes. "You know what they say, Solomon, those who can't snore end up as the butt of the joke." Gino leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper like we weren't alone on a deserted ship in the middle of nowhere. "We need a plan. That core isn't going to sabotage itself." "No, but you might," Maria shot back. "Remember that time with the toaster?" "Hey, hey, hey," Gino protested, hands raised in mock surrender. "I said it was a one-time thing. Besides, it was defective, like hostile." "Yes, sure," Solomon said, eyes twinkling. "And I'm the Emperor of Mars." "Enough," I said, standing up. "Maria, you're our tech wizard. Can you get us a layout of the core's innards?" She huffed, pulling up more schematics. "Sure, Captain. I'll just open up my magic bag of tricks." "How's next Tuesday sound?" "Perfect," I said, feigning cheeriness. "Except we need it now." She tapped a few more commands, her brows furrowing as she scrutinized the screen. "The core's a mess of redundancies, defensive measures, and really, really angry-looking code. It's like someone built a fortress and then decided to add extra spikes for fun." "Great," I said, rubbing my temples. "So, Gino, if Maria cracks the code, you're our guy for the heavy lifting. Solomon, you're on lookout. Keep an eye out for anyone who looks like they want to eat us or make us part of the furniture." "Piece of cake," Solomon said, "or at least a piece of something, possibly toxic." "Right," I said, trying to ignore the gnawing doubt in my gut. "Let's get back to the temple. We've got a planet to save." The rust bucket's engines hummed as we set course for the temple, the familiar sound almost comforting. Almost. If you ignored the occasional clunk that suggested an imminent systems failure. "Leora," Maria called from her station. "You might want to see this." I leaned over her shoulder, watching as the hologram flickered with new data. "What am I looking at?" "Possible entry point," she said, pointing to a section of the temple that glowed an ominous red. "Not the front door, mind you. More like the back window that someone forgot to lock and the downside." I asked, knowing there had to be one. There always was, possibly booby-trapped. Or maybe just guarded by something with more teeth than brain cells. Sounds like a challenge, Gino said, a gleam in his eye. I say we take it. I say you're nuts, Solomon replied. But what else is new? All right, team, I said, straightening up. Lock and load. We're going in. The temple loomed before us once more, a jagged silhouette against the backdrop of Saturn's rings. It looked just as welcoming as last time, which is to say, not at all. If anything, it seemed even more menacing, like it had spent the time we were gone brooding over our previous trespass. We suited up, the clink of gear breaking the silence as we prepped for our little sabotage mission. The weight of the mission settled on my shoulders, a familiar companion to the general sense of impending doom that was part and parcel of spacefaring life. Gino, any chance you've perfected your alien tech wrestling moves since last time? I asked, trying to keep the mood light. He laughed, though it sounded more like a nervous tick. You kidding? I've been practicing on the Rust Bucket's toaster. If I can handle that monster, I can handle anything. Confidence is key, Solomon quipped, slinging his weapon over his shoulder. And possibly a bit of mild delusion. All right, cut the chatter, I said, glancing at each of them in turn. We go in, we hit the core, and we get out. No heroics, no detours. Got it, they chorused, though the glint in Solomon's eyes suggested he'd already planned at least 3 detours and a dramatic rescue or 2. We breached the temple, slipping through the hidden entry point Maria had pinpointed. The air was cooler, less suffocating than before, but the vibrations were still there, a constant thrumming beneath our feet that reminded me just what was at stake. All right, Maria, you're up, I whispered, nodding towards the control panel she'd identified as our first target. She got to work, fingers flying over her wrist device with all the precision of a surgeon performing a particularly tricky operation. Just give me a few minutes. And by a few, I mean as long as it takes to not blow us all up. I'll take not blowing up for 200, Alex, Solomon muttered, keeping watch at the door. Gino and I hovered nearby, ready to leap into action or take cover, depending on how things went. The air was thick with anticipation, every creak of the temple a reminder that we weren't welcome. Got it, Maria said finally, stepping back from the panel. We've got access to the core. Now for the fun part. We moved quickly, navigating the labyrinthine corridors towards the core. It pulsed in the distance, a sickly glow that made my skin crawl, and not just because it was alien and probably very deadly. Gino, you're the muscle, I said, gesturing towards the core. See if you can do your thing. He nodded, stepping forward with all the confidence of a man about to wrestle a toaster from hell. All right, let's see what we've got here. The core was a tangled mess of conduits and energy streams, all thrumming with enough power to vaporize us on a bad day. Gino got to work, hands deftly dismantling and rerouting with a speed that was almost impressive. Anytime now, Gino, Solomon called, glancing back at the corridor. I'm getting twitchy. Patience is a virtue, Gino shot back, not missing a beat. And so staying alive, Maria added, her tone light but her gaze serious. Got it, Gino said, stepping back. We're good to go. Now let's get the hell out of here before someone notices. Best idea I've heard all day, I replied, motioning for the crew to move. We retraced our steps, the temple's oppressive silence replaced by a low hum of activity. Somewhere, something had noticed our meddling and it wasn't pleased. Time to go, I urged, quickening my pace. We burst out of the temple, the Rust Bucket a welcome sight against the backdrop of Saturn's rings. The engines roared to life as we boarded, the ship vibrating beneath us like it was eager to leave. Punch it, Maria, I ordered, collapsing into my seat. The Rust Bucket launched into the void, leaving the temple and the TZ-Kren's plans behind. For now. I think we just pissed off an entire alien species, Solomon said, grinning like he'd just won a bet. Wouldn't be the first time, I replied, grinning back. We were safe for the moment, but there was still work to be done. The TZ-Kren wouldn't give up easily, and neither would we. But that was a problem for tomorrow. For now, we were alive and we'd bought humanity some time. And that was enough. Saturn's rings were just distant enough to look serene, masking the chaos playing out aboard the rust bucket. Our engines hummed like a broken lullaby, but we were moving, and that was something. Maria's fingers danced on the console, a symphony of clicks and beeps. "Hey, Captain, I think we've got a problem." She didn't even bother looking up, which told me just how bad it was. "Oh, just one." I was hoping for a dozen, I replied, feeling the familiar weight of doom settle over me like an old, unwanted blanket. Gino snorted, half amused, half terrified. "You know how it is with us, Leora. One problem is just the beginning of a trilogy." Solomon, ever the optimist, leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Any chance this is a problem we can solve with duct tape and optimism?" "We're fresh out of optimism," Maria said dryly. "But there's plenty of tape." "Great, we'll wrap it around our problems and pray it holds," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "What's the actual issue, Maria? We've lost communication with Earth." "Completely blacked out," she said, tapping the screen in frustration. "It's like someone pulled the plug on the universe. Probably those charming TZ-Kren," Solomon said, his smirk fading. "They've got a real knack for making things inconvenient." A silence settled over the cockpit, heavy and uninviting. The kind of silence that makes you want to fill it with noise just to break its oppressive grip. "We're screwed," Gino said finally, stating what everyone else was thinking. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," I shot back, trying to keep the sarcasm from sounding too much like despair. "Not to play devil's advocate," Maria said, typing furiously, "but we're not totally screwed until we're actually dead. There's still time to turn things around." "Oh, good," Solomon chimed in. "I was worried we'd run out of optimism entirely." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a dizzying array of red blips. "Looks like the TZ-Kren are rolling out the welcome mat," Maria announced, her voice laced with irony. "And by welcome mat, I mean a fleet of ships aiming to obliterate us. Just once, I'd like to meet a species that welcomes us with cookies instead of cannons," I said, strapping myself into the captain's chair. "Cookies are for winners," Solomon pointed out, "and we're not exactly winning right now." "All right, team," I said, injecting as much bravado into my voice as I could muster. "We may be hanging by a thread, but we've been in worse spots." Gino raised an eyebrow. "When exactly was that?" "Because I'm drawing a blank. Consider it a general motivational statement," I replied. "Maria, any chance we can fire up the engines and make a run for it?" "Engines are primed, but they're not gonna outrun TZ-Kren tech easily," she said, glancing at the console. "We need something more than speed, like a miracle," Solomon suggested, grinning like only a man with nothing left to lose could. "Miracles are on backorder," I said, "but desperation is in stock. So let's get creative." The rust bucket shuddered as the TZ-Kren ships closed in, their weapons systems lighting up like fireworks. It was a grim reminder of our situation, as if we needed one. "Gino, you think you could reroute power from non-essential systems to the shields?" Maria asked, her fingers never slowing on the console. "Define non-essential," Gino said, fiddling with the controls. "Because if I kill the coffee maker, we're all dead inside anyway. Skip the caffeine, keep our skin intact," I said. "Priorities, Gino, right. Shields it is," he muttered, flipping switches with abandon. The hum of the ship shifted, a deep resonance reverberating through the hull as power surged towards the shields. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maybe just enough to keep us alive a bit longer. "All right, we're juiced up," Gino reported. "But we're still a sitting duck with no communication." "Then let's redirect the communication relays," I suggested. "Make it look like we're calling for backup. Bluff our way out." "You want us to play poker with the TZ-Kren?" Solomon asked, eyebrows raised. "Hey, I hear they're really bad at bluffing," I said. "Worth a shot, or it pisses them off more," Maria pointed out. "But sure, let's roll the dice." She worked her magic and the ship's systems whirred in compliance. The holographic display flickered, sending out a signal that screamed for help, hopefully loud enough to make the TZ-Kren hesitate. "We're sending a distress signal," Maria confirmed. "Let's hope they're too cautious to call our bluff. Any bets on whether they fall for it?" Solomon asked, eyes locked on the approaching ships. 20 credits says they are as dumb as they look, Gino offered. Make it 40, I said, feeling the adrenaline kick in. I'm betting they've never been hustled by a rust bucket before. The TZ-Kren fleet slowed, their formation shifting as if they were reconsidering their next move. Maybe it was working. Maybe we'd actually get out of this mess without turning into space dust. Looks like they're buying it, Maria said, a hint of hope in her voice. For now, see. A little bluffing never hurt anyone, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. And if it doesn't work, Solomon asked, ever the pragmatist, then we'll have to come up with a plan B, I replied, though the truth was, there was no plan B. Not yet, anyway. The TZ-Kren ships hovered, their hesitation palpable as they recalculated their approach. It was a standoff, the kind that made your heart beat faster and your palms sweat. They're holding, Maria whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell. Good. Let's keep them guessing, I said. Gino, keep those shields up. Solomon, keep an eye on any incoming messages. I want to know if they're calling our bluff. Got it, Solomon said, his eyes darting over his console. But don't get too comfy. The silence was tense, a coiled spring ready to snap. The TZ-Kren ships loomed, a constant reminder of the knife's edge we were balanced on. Every second felt like an eternity, as if time itself had decided to mock us. Still nothing, Solomon reported, his voice low. Maybe they're scared. If we're lucky, I replied. But let's not test our luck further than we have to. The minutes ticked by, each one a small victory in itself. We were still alive, still fighting. But the odds weren't in our favor and everyone knew it. Captain, I've got a crazy idea, Maria said suddenly, her eyes wide. Crazy's all we've got. Lay it on me, I said. We could try reverse encoding the TZ-Kren transmissions. Feed them false data. Make them think their own systems are compromised. Crazy indeed, Solomon said, a grin spreading across his face. I love it, it's risky, Maria warned. If they catch on, we're toast. Better to risk it than sit here waiting to be roasted, I said. Do it, Maria. She went to work, her fingers a blur as she hacked into the TZ-Kren systems. It was a race against time, a gamble with stakes as high as they come. All right, I've got partial access, Maria said, her focus intense. Sending false data now. The TZ-Kren ships shifted, their formation breaking as they responded to the new information. It was working, at least for the moment. They were confused, disoriented. Looks like they're chasing their own tails, Solomon said, sounding impressed. Nice work, Maria. Don't thank me yet, she replied. They could wise up at any second, but for now we've got breathing room, I said. Let's put it to use. We continued to drift, the TZ-Kren fleet in disarray. It was a tenuous victory, but a victory nonetheless. We'd bought ourselves some time, and in this business, time was everything. We need to find a way to re-establish contact with Earth, I said, thinking aloud. If we're cut off, we're fighting blind. I'll work on it, Maria promised. But it's going to take some serious out-of-the-box thinking. Good thing we're all about thinking outside the box, Solomon said. More like outside the universe, Gino added, his fingers tapping a rhythm on his console. But who's counting? The tension in the air was palpable, the unspoken fear that our luck would run out hanging over us. But for now, we'd managed to survive another brush with death. All right, team, let's regroup and figure out our next move, I said, trying to sound more hopeful than I felt. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're still breathing, and that's something. Breathing's good, Solomon said, flashing a grin. Means we can keep cracking bad jokes. Speak for yourself, Maria said, her gaze fixed on the console. I'm saving my energy for hacking and survival priorities, I said with a nod. Now let's get back to work. We've got a universe to save. The rust bucket cruised through the black, a battered but defiant relic of humanity's stubborn will to survive. We were beaten, bruised, but not broken. And as long as we drew breath, we'd fight. The TZ-Kren might have had their plans, their schemes to enslave humanity. But they hadn't counted on one thing, the indomitable spirit of a ragtag crew with nothing left to lose. As we moved through the void, I felt a flicker of hope. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed under the weight of despair. But it was there, a glimmer in the darkness. And for now, it was enough. The rust bucket, bless its rusty hull, drifted along the cosmic highway like a drunk space cowboy on a hoverboard. We weren't exactly the pride of the fleet, or even the pride of the junkyard, but we were still in the game. For now. I leaned back in the captain's chair, which was really more of a barely padded torture device, and surveyed the crew. A collection of humanity's finest, or at least the ones willing to sign a waiver. "All right, team," I said, breaking the tension like a glass dropped in a quiet room. "Who's up for a history lesson? Are we talking ancient Earth history or the kind where we find out we've pissed off another alien race?" Solomon asked, pushing off the bulkhead and stretching like he was getting ready for a jog. "In 0G. Backwards." "Neither," I said, a hint of a grin escaping despite myself. "I'm talking about something a bit more personal." Gino, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "Personal as in we're gonna find out we've been working for an evil corporation this whole time? Or personal as in we've got a long-lost cousin running a galactic tax scam? Maybe personal as in finding out our ancestors were into some weird cosmic stuff?" Maria chimed in, still glued to her console like it was a lifeline. "Given our situation, it might as well have been." I nodded. "Bingo. I think I've found something, but it's not exactly a shiny medal for humanity." "Oh, great," Gino sighed. "What did the ancient humans do this time?" "Apparently, they built some kind of temple." I gestured at the holographic display, which now showed a blueprint of the alien structure we'd found buried amongst Saturn's icy rings. "And it's not just a TZ-Kren hangout spot. It's got human fingerprints all over it. Wait, you're telling me that this death maze with a heartbeat is actually one of our own?" Solomon said, eyes wide. "Sounds about right. Ancient humans were always into kinky stuff." "Yeah, but this is a whole new level of kink," I replied. "The readings suggest it's some sort of a binding ritual." The TZ-Kren probably hijacked it for their own purposes. Maria's fingers danced over her console, and the screen shifted to show energy readings. "These orbs we found, they're conducting massive amounts of energy. I think our old buddies set this up as a sort of power station mixed with bad juju." "Bad juju sounds about right," Gino said. "Leave it to our ancestors to leave us a present that could blow up in our faces. So what do we do with this heartwarming family heirloom?" Solomon asked. "We leverage it," I said, feeling the fire of rebellion spark in my gut. "We use it against the TZ-Kren. Make them regret ever messing with my ship and my crew." "Your ship?" Gino smirked. "I thought it was just on loan from the scrapyard." "Details, Gino." "Details?" Maria interrupted. "I'm pulling more data. Seems like this temple could be connected to other sites across the galaxy, other human relics. Maybe even a network like the interstellar equivalent of an old dial-up network." Solomon asked. "Exactly. Except instead of slow internet, you get cosmic energy and alien overlords." Maria paused, her eyes narrowing at the data spilling across her screen. "There might be a way to use this place to send a message, something powerful enough to breach the blackout. An SOS amplified by the ghosts of humanity's past." I mused. "Sounds like the plot of a really bad sci-fi novel." "Yeah, but it's what we've got," Maria said. "If we can tap into the right frequency, maybe get Earth's attention." Gino folded his arms, skepticism practically oozing from every pore. "And how do we do that without tripping over our own feet and accidentally setting it to self-destruct?" "That's where things get dicey," Maria admitted. "I'll need to fine-tune the energy output, make sure it doesn't backfire." Solomon piped up. "I love it when a plan almost comes together." "Almost being the key word," I said. "But it's better than nothing. Let's get to work." As the crew got to it, I stared at the holographic display, feeling a strange mix of dread and determination. The discovery brought a new light to our grim situation, like the universe was throwing us a bone just to see if we'd choke on it. "Captain, you might want to see this," Maria called, her voice cutting through my thoughts like a laser. She had that look, the one that said she'd found something big. "What is it?" I asked, stepping closer to her station. "Coordinates," she said, pointing at the screen, "hidden in the data. They're connected to other sites like branches from a twisted family tree. We've got a treasure map to more ancient disasters, Gino asked, leaning over her shoulder. More like a trail leading to other temples, Maria corrected. And possibly a way to disrupt the TZ-Kren's control over them. Now we're talking, Solomon said, a grin spreading across his face. This is the kind of crazy I can get behind. Then let's not waste time, I said, feeling the weight of the task ahead settle on my shoulders. We'll need to split our focus. Keep the TZ-Kren busy while we work on broadcasting that message. Sounds like a plan with a million ways to go wrong, Gino said with a nod. But I guess that's why they pay us in cosmic credits and caffeine. More the caffeine than anything else, Solomon quipped. As the crew dove into their tasks, the Rust Bucket's engines gave a low, moaning protest, as if sensing the insanity we were about to unleash. I took a deep breath, casting one last look at the blueprint of the temple that had landed us in this mess. Maybe our ancestors were trying to tell us something from beyond the grave, or maybe they just had really bad taste in Dacre. All right, Maria, I said, steeling myself. Dial into that energy and start prepping the signal. Solomon, keep tabs on the TZ-Kren's movements. Got it, Solomon replied, his eyes focused on the incoming blips. The ship's lights flickered as Maria started the energy transfer, the temple's power humming through our systems like a great, ancient beast waking from slumber. The theory was that we could harness enough energy to punch through the TZ-Kren's blackout, but whether it would work or just blow out our circuits was anyone's guess. Gino, make sure our shields stay up. I don't want to be caught with our pants down if the TZ-Kren decide to crash the party, I ordered. On it, Captain, Gino replied, hands moving deftly over the controls. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of burnt wiring, a combination I'd grown far too accustomed to. Outside, the stars watched, uncaring of the tiny drama unfolding in their vast expanse. Energy levels are climbing, Maria reported, her fingers a blur across the console. We're approaching the threshold. Good, keep it steady, I said, feeling the adrenaline mix with the rising hum of the ship. It was a bit like riding a wild beast if that beast had the potential to explode at any moment. Captain, we've got movement, Solomon said, eyes glued to his screen. The TZ-Kren are regrouping. Looks like they are onto us. Perfect timing, I muttered. Let's hope they're confused enough to hesitate, or overconfident enough to underestimate us, Gino added. Maria's console beeped, drawing our attention back. We've got enough energy to make the broadcast, she announced. Do it, I said. Shoot our distress call into the void. With a nod, Maria activated the signal. The rust bucket trembled as the energy surged through it, a glowing beacon pulsing out into the dark, an SOS from the edge of oblivion. For a moment, the ship was alive with light, the very walls vibrating with the desperate message we sent forth. And then it was gone, the light fading back to the dull glow of our emergency lighting. The rust bucket was once again just a battered ship, held together by hope and old promises. We're live, Maria confirmed, her voice a mixture of awe and exhaustion. Now we wait. Hope someone out there's listening, Solomon said. If not, at least we gave them a hell of a light show, Gino said with a grin. I sat back, the tension in my shoulders easing just a fraction. We'd done something, taken a shot in the dark against impossible odds. Whether it would make a difference, only time would tell. The TZ-Kren ship still circled, a silent threat looming as we drifted. But something had changed. A new resolve, a shared understanding that we weren't just fighting for survival, but for something bigger. An ancient legacy, a chance to prove humanity was more than just a footnote in the annals of the cosmos. All right, folks, I said, my voice steady and sure. We've bought ourselves a little time. Let's make sure we use it wisely. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for everyone who ever called this galaxy home. Aye, Captain, Solomon said, a glint of determination in his eyes. We set to work, the steady rhythm of our efforts echoing in the cramped quarters. The TZ-Kren might still have the upper hand, but we had something they didn't, a belief in our own resilience, our own ability to defy the odds. And as we fought to hold onto that fragile hope, I couldn't help but smile. Because in a universe that seemed determined to grind us into space dust, we were still here, still fighting, still defiant. And that was something worth fighting for. The Rust Bucket's cockpit was a symphony of clanks and creaks, with the occasional hissing sound. Probably the ship's way of telling us it was still alive, or maybe just a polite suggestion we should start looking for life insurance. Maria was hunched over her console, surrounded by the glow of screens and the faint scent of burnt wires. She looked up, her eyes bleary but determined. "Captain, I think I've found a weak spot in the TZ-Kren's gravity weapons. It's like they didn't consider someone as crazy as us would go poking around in their tech." "More fools them," I said, leaning back in my barely padded chair, which was protesting under the strain like an ancient office chair on its last wheel. The TZ-Kren had been a pain in our collective arse since day one, their tech usually 10 steps ahead of ours. But today, we'd caught a break. I glanced over at Solomon, who was fiddling with a screwdriver like it was a baton. "Solomon, feel like turning the tables." "Always, Captain." "Making the TZ-Kren eat their own gravity is like Christmas came early," he grinned, his fingers twirling the screwdriver with the dexterity of a magician. "Let's give 'em a taste of their own medicine." "Medicine? More like their own laxative," Gino piped up from his station, arms crossed, a skeptical brow raised. "You sure this isn't going to backfire and turn us into cosmic salsa? You're the one with the control over the shields, Gino. Just make sure they hold. I've had my fill of unexpected decompression drills for one lifetime," I retorted with an air of mock authority. "Right, because nothing says calm under pressure like a hull breach." Gino rolled his eyes but got to work anyway, his fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist playing on a keyboard made of stress and caffeine. Maria's console beeped again, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the cabin's ambient chaos. "I've got the schematics up," she announced. "The TZ-Kren's gravity weapons have a regulator, a kind of failsafe to prevent. Well, this sort of thing. If we tweak it, we can redirect the gravitational pull. Turn their own weapon into a black hole buffet for them," Solomon asked, his smile widening to Cheshire Cat levels. "Exactly," Maria confirmed, her eyes gleaming with that mad scientist spark everyone loves or fears. "And here I thought we were just going to run away like sensible cowards," Gino muttered, though his grin suggested he was more than on board with the plan. "Let's just try not to get sucked into our own surprise party." "Good advice," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Try not to die, that's the master plan." We got to work, each of us in a dance of button presses and lever pulls, a waltz of desperation and defiance. The TZ-Kren's ships were still hanging around, oblivious to the fact they were about to get a lesson in human unpredictability. Solomon was in charge of the physical adjustments, crawling through ducts and maintenance hatches like a rat in a maze, cursing under his breath. "Remind me why I'm always the one doing the dirty work," he called out, his voice echoing through the ship's comm system. "Because you fit in the ducts," I replied, not missing a beat. "And you whine the least." "Ha, must be my winning personality that gets me all the plum assignments," Solomon shot back, his sarcasm echoing as a metallic clang rang out. "Or the fact I'm not afraid of a little tetanus." Maria's fingers danced over her console, eyes flicking between screens. "Adjusting the regulator now. If I've done this right, we should see the TZ-Kren system start to overload." "And if you've done it wrong?" Gino asked, his voice oozing skepticism like a leaky faucet. "Then we might get a lovely view of our own intestines through the front window," Maria said without missing a beat, her tone as dry as a Martian summer. "Comforting," Gino replied, but his focus remained on his controls, ready to adjust the shields at a moment's notice. I watched as the monitors displayed the TZ-Kren ships, their sleek, ominous forms suddenly jittering like a video feed with a bad connection. Maria had done it, she turned their weapons against them. The TZ-Kren vessels began to wobble, caught in their own gravitational snares. One moment they were poised predators, and the next they were spinning tops, struggling to regain control. "Looks like they weren't ready for a bit of gravitational seasoning," Solomon crowed from wherever he'd wedged himself in the ship. "Keep your eyes peeled," I warned. "They won't stay confused forever." As if on cue, the TZ-Kren ships began firing wildly, their disoriented shots lighting up the void like a cosmic fireworks display. It was chaos, and in that chaos we found our chance. "Captain, I'm picking up a message," Maria said, her voice suddenly urgent. "It's weak, but it's coming from one of the human relics, the temple's network." I turned to her, my heart skipping a beat. "Put it through." The voice crackled to life through our speakers, distorted but unmistakably human. "This, Earth receiving, your signal, help on the way." The message cut off, leaving only static in its wake. "Earth heard us," Solomon said, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "They actually heard us." I allowed myself a moment of relief, a fraction of a second to savor that we'd achieved the impossible. Then the reality of our situation snapped back into focus. The TZ-Kren were still out there, and we just poked the bear with a very sharp stick. "Okay, folks, we're not out of the woods yet," I said, snapping back to command mode. "We need to hold out until Earth's cavalry arrives. Solomon, get back here and help Gino with the shields. Maria, see if you can maintain the signal, keep Earth in the loop." "On it, Captain," Maria replied, her fingers flying over the controls. The rust bucket shuddered as a stray TZ-Kren shot grazed us, the ship's alarm screeching like a banshee. "Gino, keep those shields steady." "I'm trying, Captain, but Rusty here isn't exactly built for a prolonged firefight." Gino's voice came through gritted teeth, every muscle in his body tense as he adjusted the ship's systems. "Then let's make sure it's not a prolonged one," I replied, the thrill of desperation and hope mingling in my chest. "Maria, any chance we can reroute more power to the engines? If we can outmaneuver them, we might just survive this." "I'll see what I can do," Maria said, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the task. "Might have to sacrifice the coffee maker, though." "Do it," I said as the ship lurched again. "We'll live without caffeine." "Maybe." The rust bucket groaned as the engines roared to life, like waking a slumbering beast with a rude poke. We shot forward, weaving between the erratic TZ-Kren fire. Solomon had rejoined us, sliding back into his seat with a practiced ease that spoke volumes about the kind of scrapes we'd survived before. "Nice of you to rejoin us," Gino said, his voice a mix of sarcasm and relief. "Figured you might need someone to hold your hand," Solomon quipped back, adjusting the shield settings. Together we worked like a well-oiled, albeit slightly rusty machine. The TZ-Kren were still out there, their ships like angry hornets, but their fire was sporadic and wild, a testament to the chaos we'd sown. "Captain, the signal's holding," Maria said, her face lit by the glow of her console. "Earth knows we're here. They'll send help." "That's the first bit of good news I've heard today," I said, allowing myself a grim smile. The TZ-Kren ships were starting to regroup, their movements becoming more coordinated as they adjusted to the new gravitational dynamics. But that was fine. We just needed to hold them off a little longer. "How much longer do we need to play tag with these bastards?" Gino asked, his eyes fixed on the monitors. "Just enough for Earth to send their love letter," I replied. "And while we wait, let's make sure the TZ-Kren remember this day." The crew nodded, a shared understanding passing between us. We were outmatched, outgunned, but not out of the fight. Not yet. The TZ-Kren had underestimated us, and now they were paying for it. For once, we had the advantage, however slim it might be. As the rust bucket danced among the stars, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride for my crew. We'd taken on an enemy far beyond our capabilities and somehow managed to hold our own. In the grand tapestry of the universe, we were a single thread, but today we were a thread that refused to be cut. "Captain, TZ-Kren ships are pulling back," Solomon said, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Whatever we're doing, it's working. Or they're just regrouping for a bigger attack," Gino warned, ever the pessimist. Either way, we're still breathing, I said. And that's more than we could say an hour ago. The TZ-Kren ships slowly retreated, their forms becoming distant silhouettes against the stars. I knew this wasn't the end. They'd be back, and likely with a vengeance. But for now, we'd won a small victory. Let's keep the pressure on, I ordered. We've got a chance to turn the tables, and I'm not about to waste it. As we continued our maneuvers, the rust bucket seemed to settle into a rhythm, the ship's engines purring with contentment, or maybe just the relief of not being blown to pieces. Either way, we were still here, still fighting. And for now, that was enough. Maria, keep monitoring that signal. Salam and Gino, let's see if we can patch up the shields and get ready for the next round. Aye, Captain, they chorused, each of them already focused on their next task. As I watched my crew work, the weight of our actions settled around me. We'd managed to turn a possible death sentence into a fighting chance. And if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was defying the odds. All right, folks, I said, my voice steady and sure. Let's show the universe what a few stubborn humans can do when they're backed into a corner. With that, we dove back into the fray, ready to face whatever came next. And as the stars whirled around us, I couldn't help but smile. Because in a universe determined to grind us into dust, we'd proven that humanity was still here, and we weren't going down without a fight. We just pulled off a minor miracle, the kind that makes you wonder if the universe is setting up a bigger punchline. The TZ-Kren were retreating, or regrouping, or whatever alien bastards do when they're not actively trying to disembowel you with gravity beams. Not that it mattered. We were still breathing, still flying, and for a crew like ours, that was a win. All right, folks, I said, leaning back in the captain's chair, which had all the comfort of a brick wrapped in duct tape. Time to wrap this up before the universe changes its mind. About that victory lap, Gino chimed in, his voice crackling through the comms like a bad joke. The rust bucket's shields are holding by a thread, and the engines are doing their best impression of a dying whale. Details, I replied with a wave of my hand. We'll patch her up. Solomon, how's our guest? Solomon, his head sticking out from a maintenance hatch like a curious meerkat, grinned. The temple's tech is secure. We rigged it so if anyone tries to use it against us, they'll get a nice surprise. Like a piñata, but with more explosions. Perfect. Nothing says welcome to the neighborhood like a booby-trapped alien artifact, I said, nodding approvingly. Maria, how's that signal? It's holding, Maria replied, swiping at her console. Her fingers were a blur, the dance of a caffeinated pianist. Earth's on the line and they're sending backup. An actual fleet this time, not just a "we'll get back to you in 5 business days. Good to know someone finally checked their voicemail, Gino muttered, shaking his head. What took him so long? Were they stuck in traffic? I hear the cosmic carpool lane is a bitch, Solomon added from his perch. Takes forever to get anywhere. We shared a laugh, the kind that bubbles up when you're too tired to cry and too relieved to care. The TZ-Kren had underestimated us, and it was that arrogance that had given us the edge. Human ingenuity, coupled with a healthy dose of recklessness, had pulled us through. Not bad for a bunch of misfits in a ship held together by hope and duct tape. Okay, let's see if we can secure this temple for the long haul, I said, standing up. Gino, start running diagnostics on the shields. Solomon, get back to your duck dancing routine and make sure our little surprise package is as explosive as promised. And what about me? Maria asked, still focused on her console but with one eye on me. Keep that signal open and feed Earth all the dirt on the TZ-Kren we can muster, I replied. We might have won today, but there's no telling when those tentacled bastards will be back. Maria nodded, her lips quirking into a smirk. You got it, Captain. I'll make sure they get the full scoop, warts and all. As my crew set about their tasks, I took a moment to revel in the silence. Well, as silent as the rust bucket ever got. There was the constant hum of the engines, the occasional hiss of steam escaping through a crack somewhere, and the ever-present creak of metal straining against the vacuum of space. But to me, it was home. A noisy, battered, and slightly dangerous home, but home all the same. With the temple secured, we had a chance to ensure it wouldn't be used for anything nefarious. The TZ-Kren had intended to unleash something terrible to enslave humanity or worse. But now we had the temple and with it the opportunity to turn the tables. "Captain," Gino's voice broke through the intercom, "shields are stable for now, but we'd better not get into another skirmish anytime soon. The old girl's holding, but she's tired." "Aren't we all?" I muttered, then louder, "Good work, Gino. Keep her together a little longer, and we'll all get a good night's sleep assuming there's a night in space. Time is a construct anyway, right?" Gino replied, his tone light but edged with weariness. "That's the spirit," I said, making my way to Solomon. He was elbow-deep in some alien tech, wires sprouting from the console like a particularly aggressive weed. "How's it looking?" I asked, peering over his shoulder. "Like something that had given an electrician a heart attack," Solomon replied with a shrug. "But it's set. Anyone tries to activate this thing and they'll get a face full of kaboom. I'd pay to see that," I said, nudging him with my foot. "Nice work." "Thanks, boss," Solomon said, grinning as he wiped his hands on an already filthy rag. "You know, for a bunch of cosmic hitchhikers, we're not half bad at the spacefaring hero stuff. Speak for yourself," Maria interjected, her voice carrying a hint of laughter. "I'm one coffee machine short of a meltdown." "Don't worry, we'll get you a new one," I promised, turning my attention back to the task at hand. "Okay, folks, we've got the temple locked down. Earth's on its way. Now we just need to ensure we're ready for the next round. Assuming there is one," Gino added, ever the realist. "We sent them packing, but they'll be back, probably with bigger guns." "True enough," I conceded. "But today we proved we can stand toe-to-toe with them, and that's a start." As we went through the motions of securing our prize, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride in my chest. We'd done what had seemed impossible. No one would have blamed us for running, for hiding, for simply trying to survive another day. But we'd chosen to fight, to stand up against an enemy that outgunned and outclassed us. And we'd won. "Captain," Maria said, breaking the moment with her no-nonsense voice, "Earth's sending a full debrief team. They want to know everything about the temple and the TZ-Kren tech." "Great, more paperwork," I groused, though the truth was I didn't mind. If it meant getting more allies in this fight, I'd even learn to love bureaucracy. "Well, tolerate it anyway. Think they'll give us medals," Solomon quipped, joining us in the cockpit. "Or just a pat on the back and a better luck next time." "I'm holding out for a raise," Gino chimed in. "But knowing our luck, we'll be lucky to get a thank you card." "Hell, I'd settle for another crate of rations," Maria added, her eyes still glued to the console. The banter was light, but it masked the relief we felt. We'd survived, and that was no small feat. As we drifted among the stars, the rust bucket a small defiant dot against the vastness of space, it felt like the universe had finally thrown us a bone. Not much, but enough. "All right, team," I said, feeling the weight of command rest on my shoulders once more. "Let's finish up here and get ready for Earth's welcome party. We've got a lot of explaining to do, and I want to be on our best behavior." "Does that mean no swearing?" Solomon asked, eyes wide with mock innocence. "Only if you can manage it," I shot back, grinning. "Now let's get to work." With a cheer that was more exhaustion than enthusiasm, we set about preparing for Earth's arrival. The temple was secure, our report was ready, and the rust bucket was holding together, if only by sheer stubbornness and a few judiciously applied strips of duct tape. As I watched my crew move with the practiced ease of people who'd spent far too long in each other's company, I felt a surge of gratitude. We'd been through hell and back, and somehow we'd come out stronger for it. "Captain," Maria's voice cut through my musings, "I've got a visual on Earth's fleet. Looks like they're rolling out the red carpet." "About time," I said, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. "Open a channel. Let's give them a proper welcome." The screen flickered to life, and the sight of Earth's ships, sleek and powerful, filled the viewport. It was a sight for sore eyes and a reminder that we weren't alone in this fight. "This is Captain Leora Tark of the Rust Bucket," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Welcome to the party, Earth. Sorry we started without you." A voice crackled through the comms, rich with authority and warmth. "Captain Tark, this is Admiral Jenkins. We've received your signal and are here to assist. Nice work out there." "Thanks, Admiral," I replied. We were just about to roll out the welcome mat. "Understood," Jenkins said, his tone light. "We'll take it from here, prepare for boarding and debriefing." "Looking forward to it," I said, cutting the channel. "All right, team, you heard the man. Let's get ready to greet our guests." With a final nod to my crew, we settled into position, ready for whatever came next. We'd face the impossible and come out on top. Now, as we stood on the brink of a new challenge, one thing was certain. Whatever the universe threw at us next, we'd face it together. As Earth ships surrounded us, a promise of safety and support, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. We'd secured the temple, protected humanity, and in doing so, proven that even in the darkest corners of space, human tenacity and wit could shine through. And as the Rust Bucket floated amidst the stars, a testament to our resilience, one thought echoed in my mind. We might be small, we might be battered, but we were unbroken. And that was enough.